So we are in the middle of a sermon series called Rise, where we are talking about how this Lenten season and as we approach Easter, that rising isn't just for Jesus, that rising is for us to take this time during Lent to let go of those things that are weighing us down so that we can also fly and be who we are intended to be, that Lent is a time where Jesus is trying to teach us about ways that we can be, about ways that we can walk and live and do, that is going to enable us to rise and be the children of God that we were born as and who we are claimed to be going forward in our life. Now, last week we talked about judgment and rising above judgment. And one of the things we talked about was this idea of judgment, because it is such a big deal in society today and a big part of Christianity. And one of the reasons that it's such a big deal and one of the reasons that it's such a problem is that people will tend to throw the judgment card, right? People tend to throw the judgment card, and sometimes people will use this as a bludgeon, right? Use their judgment on somebody else as a club. Garrett, see what I did right there? You use a club. Right there, the judgment card, the club there. Right? You use the judgment card as a club and just beat people down and say, I have the one right answer, and I'm going to tell you how you're supposed to be, and this is exactly what God says, and I have the absolute answer, and you have to do it my way, or I'm going to judge you, and if you don't do it my way, I'm going to do it in the legislatures, and I'm going to do it in the other ways, and I'm going to threaten you at the polls, and I'm going to do all kinds of stuff, and I'm going to judge you and take actions in these ways. Now, the other way that this judgment card is used is as a defense when other people of faith criticize folks who are doing faith that way, which we are called to do, by the way. We are called to correct our fellow Christians when they are acting in a way that is not in justice and inconsistent with the way of the teachings of Jesus. But sometimes people throw the judgment card out there and say, you have no right to judge me. Who are you to judge me? As a matter of fact, it says in the Bible, in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1, do not judge. And I'm like, you're absolutely correct. I said the problem is there's a comma after that. Right? There's the rest of the sentence, and there's the rest of the paragraph, and there's the rest of the chapter that gives a lot of information about that. And what it actually says is, it doesn't say don't judge. As a matter of fact, Jesus explicitly says we're supposed to judge. We're supposed to discern the difference between good and evil, and we're supposed to go against injustice. And we're supposed to help people and correct people when they're headed in the wrong direction to find the way back to the path, the narrow way of justice and good and compassion and love in the way of Jesus. It's not that we're not supposed to judge, it's that we're not supposed to judge unfairly. Because we're not supposed to keep our mouths shut. And that's a lot of times when people say, don't judge, that's what they mean. They say, you just keep your mouth shut and let me do whatever the heck I want. That is called laziness. That is called laziness. That is called cowardice when we do that. When we know there's an injustice, when we know someone is doing something along the wrong path and we don't do it, that is called religious cowardice, right? So what this is, it's not about not judging, it's about doing it fairly and knowing how to do it. Because that has implications for our relationships with each other. In this world, it also has implications for how we will be looked at when we have our time to talk to God, when we continue from this physical life into a different form of life. And we talked about how Jesus, though, warned us that if we're going to judge, to be careful, to make sure that before we start looking at the specks in other people's eyes, that we take the log out of our own eye. And we had a very courageous John come on up here and have this come really close to his eye to the point where he admitted he was uncomfortable, and justifiably so. And we talked about how Jesus said, look, before you are going to judge somebody and try to take the speck out of their eye, you need to take the log out of your eye first. Now, what this does not mean is that just because you have a log in your eye, that you don't go and still correct other folks. It means first you got to deal with your own stuff. First, you got to make sure your heart's in the right place. You got to know that you're coming at this with a good heart and not doing it from some kind of place of punishment. And we said, okay, but once you get the log out of your own eye, which is a lot of work, by the way, right? Sometimes you got to work on your own stuff. That may be hard work. It said, then after you do that, then you go to the other person and help them with the speck. Because the speck wasn't meant to be nothing. A speck in the eye can hurt. How many people have had dirt in their eyes and it has hurt? Right? How many people here wear contacts and have had dirt get behind that contact? And I said last week, I've been in a car when someone had a speck of dirt behind a contact and I'm in the passenger side and they literally say, take the wheel, and their head drops and they're dealing with their contact. But this is serious. Like, the speck matters. It's just that it's not easy to do this. The instructions are, no, it's not easy to work on yourself and the other person, but you've got to do it. It's not easy, but it works. And we heard how Jesus said, look, that's why we call this the narrow way. Because if you just take the easy way out, if you just keep your mouth shut, or even if you just say, I'm going to be a good person, I'm just going to take that log out and not bother anybody else, that is the wide way, and the wide way leads to destruction. The wide way leads to destruction. So we're called to do the not easy thing, but we know it works. But then I asked a question of everybody and said, would you like to know how to get rid of and how to hone down and how to work to get rid of that log in your eye so that you can know your heart, you know your spirit, you know yourself's in a good place when you go to do that thing to help the other person? I said, are you curious about that? And people said, yes. And I said, well, that's what next week's sermon's about. So welcome to this week's sermon, Rising to Curiosity. So what we're going to do now is something, if you're willing to do it, if you don't feel like doing this, you don't have to. But what I would like everybody to do is get up for a second, rise in body or spirit. If you're uncomfortable getting up, you do not have to get up. And here's what I want you to do. For the next minute to minute and a half, I want you to scramble around this congregation, and I want you to introduce yourself to as many people as you have not met yet. And if you are not comfortable moving around like that, you just stay there, and people will come to you. And Eustace, I'm going to ask you to play some music for this, and then I'll call out. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go! I know you. I know you.
I'm Sean as well.
Excellent. Perfect. All right, and everybody back to your seats. Everybody back. Now just gradually, you can take your time. You don't have to trample anybody to get there, but gradually make your way back to your seats. Now I got a question for you. What changed in the room when you did that? The energy, right? The energy in the room changed. The energy in the room changed. Energy matters in these situations. Energy matters in personal relationships. Energy matters in faith, right? Energy matters. Have you ever been in a really good mood and you entered a room, it's totally fine. Don't worry about everybody. Scrambled everybody around. Move where you need to go. Take seats wherever you need to take. Take as long as you need. But if you ever been in a really good mood and you walked into a room and it just sucked the life out of you because the energy in that room was so miserable, right? Have you ever been in a room where everything was really good and then someone with really negative energy came in and it just sucked the life out of the room? Energy matters, and there's all kinds of different energy, right? There's high energy and there's low energy. There's positive energy and there's negative energy. And there's high positive energy that you're kind of feeling like right now, and you're like really ecstatic and things are happy. You got that really high positive energy. There's also high negative energy. What does that look like? Stressful, anger. What else? Like, what does high negative energy look like? Sure, right? All that kind of stuff. So then you also have low energy. And low doesn't mean bad, right? You can have low negative energy, which means you can be really depressed. Right? You can be really sad. You can be in a really very difficult place. You can also have low positive energy. You're meditating. You're grateful. You're just in a really, really, really good place. Right? And these things are important. And these things affect our moods. Don't even tell me this isn't brilliant drawing. Don't even go there. Don't even go there, right? Right? This impacts our moods, and moods are incredibly important to our faith life and to our relationships and what we're going to bring to a conversation when we're going to have a conversation for somebody. So you got different moods. It may be a happy mood. You may be depressed in a sad mood. You may be super, super, super angry. How do you think this person's going to help a conversation when they enter into it? Do you want to be in this conversation with this individual when they're there? And they got some people are just like, meh. Right? And some people are just like, I don't know what I'm thinking right now. Like, I have no idea what I'm thinking right now. And I left out like the classic guy one that drives women crazy, which is what are you thinking? Nothing. You're like, nothing. Right? Like there is such a one where like there's no mood, there's no thinking going on. We're just kind of like empty and we're happy there. And I know many women just don't understand it, but that's actually a real circle that I just chose not to draw. But the point is that there are different moods that can happen, and that can impact things. So for a second, what I would like you to do is imagine that you are on a city street. Imagine you're on a city street. And let's pretend it's like New York City or something like that. And just on the main street, what might you see there? Okay, pigeons. What else might you see? Right, you might see something like this, right? City street. You might see some cabs. You might see some buildings. All right, you might see some. What else might you see? People. All right. So, right, you might see some people, some traffic lights, some different things. It's amazing that I know what you're going to say next, right? So here we go. But we got the people and different things, and you're at that level, and you're kind of at that medium level right there. Let's say we enter a building now. Okay. We're going to enter a building now. And because we're going to be talking about something called the mood elevator. And this is important. Some of you may have heard of the mood elevator before. It's not something that I invented. It's something I learned in my corporate life from a group called Send Delaney. And it's something that I spent years and years teaching as we tried to do culture change and helping people with relationships and interactions and faith and all kinds of different things that were going on. But let's say you went into this building, you went into an elevator, and see go ahead, give the next picture, and you went down in this elevator, and you went way down to the bottom of this building. What do you see there? At the boiler room, do you see windows? Is it a place you want to spend a lot of time? Is it a feel-good place? Wait till you see the next one. People are cringing, right? See, people are actually cringing looking at this. When you're very bottom, you can imagine like someone who's feeling really dark and depressed and having it just not seeing the light in this, light in this way and just things all around them. It's very difficult to get out of this. And this is all part of what's called mood elevator. Now let's say you get up above mid-level, and you're in this elevator and you're up above mid-level now. Now, this is actually the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. If you haven't been there, you should definitely go take a look at it. But you're getting a different perspective, right? What are you seeing here? Right, you're starting to see some light. You're starting to see something beyond. You might even look down from one of these middle levels and see people below or flowers or different things going on. Now, what if you went even farther up in this mood elevator? Right, you start to see a broader perspective. And if you get even higher up there, what do you start to see? Right? And the people and the things, and you might see cars moving around or people moving around, but they're in a much different perspective. And you're looking all over, but you can see the context of things within which things are happening. So there's also this thing called the mood elevator. Now, I know you can't read all the words on this. We're going to break this down so you're going to be able to see some of this a little bit more clearly as we go through it. But we're going to start at the lower end of the mood elevator. So you can see words like impatient and frustrated, and that's kind of the top of the worst part. So the worst part of the mood elevator is at the very bottom. When you are depressed, angry, and hostile. And this is about relationships. If you're feeling angry and hostile, and we're going to go talk about this person's speck in their eye, or someone that we're going to go try help, or a conversation we're going to go have, if you are angry and hostile, how do you think that's going to go? Poorly, right? That is going to go poorly. If you're in there and you're feeling all self-righteous, right? Feeling all self-righteous, that conversation is going to go poorly. And if you're way down there, and you're in that place of depression, and it's just miserable down there. Look, you can't just pull yourself straight from there all the way to the top, but you got to work towards it, piece at a time. And what you can do is, if we're still looking at the bottom of the next part of the mood elevator, you can start to move up. But if you are worried and anxious and irritated and bothered, when you go in for that meeting, it's not going to go particularly well. Let's take a look at the top end of the mood elevator. So it's this part of the mood elevator. When you're beginning to get above ground level, you see things like flexible, adaptive, cooperative. You could see how if you walk into a meeting in that way or going to have a conversation with someone, if you can at least get there, you have a chance for a really good situation. Now, the idea, if you can get to wise and insightful, creative, innovative, and even grateful. Grateful is when you have that wide perspective, right? Where even if people are coming at you, if you have that grateful perspective, you can say, you know what, I get it. I can see they almost seem like those small folks or cars down here because you've got the big perspective and you can say, look, I get that they're coming at me. I get they're mad, but I can see the whole wide picture and maybe why they might be acting like that. Now, there is a hinge point in the mood elevator. A hinge point. And go ahead and bring the next one up. And that hinge point is curious. That hinge point is curious. If you can't get yourself all the way to grateful, that's understandable. We work a lot on that, right? Some of you do the gratitude journals. We talk a lot about gratitude and being thankful and praise and doing things to try to help you get closer to grateful. But the hinge point for relationships, for faith, and all these things is, can you get to being interested in the other person? Can you get to curious as to why they are in that place? Can you get to curious about yourself and interested in yourself as to why you feel this way, is why you might have this here in your eye and how you can put it down? Can you put that down just enough, even if you're feeling irritable or upset? Can you get yourself to curious? And like, all right, that's interesting. You learned that in your corporate training and all that kind of stuff. What does that have to do with faith? Jesus have anything to say about this? Jesus ever talk about this? Got my fellow pastor friend over there, the Reverend David Runis, giving me a wry smile saying, I know where you're going now. Jesus almost always answered questions with questions. because he wanted people to be curious. He wanted people to know that they could ask questions. He wanted them. He gave people stories and parallels because he knew most people came to him judgmental or angry at what he was doing, and he knew the only hope that he had to get them to hear his story was to get them to curious. So he told some funky parable where people are like, "Where are you going, Jesus?" And all he was doing, resetting their head to get to curious. And once he got them to curious, they could hear what he was saying. And he would ask them questions, and he would answer their questions with questions to get them to curious. And then he would say, and this is just shortly after, last week when we talked about the judgment thing, that was Matthew 7, verses 1 through 5. This is Matthew 7, verses 7 and 8. Like, this is immediately following. This is all relevant to how we get to figuring out how we do judgment in the right way and get to the right heart and get to the right place. Ask. 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 And it will be given to you. And it's not a car, right? It's when they're asking, how do we do this thing that we get to help other people when we are hurting ourselves? And it's not enough to just be a good person. And we know that we need to work on ourselves, but we know that we're going to need to help other people and fight injustice in the future as well. Ask. And if you ask, you will receive. What else do we do? Well, go seek that, and you will find, and then knock, and that door will be opened. All of these things are aspects of curiosity. Jesus asking, begging, cajoling, pleading with everybody he could find, whether they were literally the 12 or they were other disciples or other followers, saying, just ask. Ask. Seek, knock, because ask and you will find that narrow way that he talks about in just another 5 verses. Ask if you don't know how to get there. Ask me. Ask somebody else. Just ask and be curious. Don't assume. Don't jump to a conclusion. Don't get angry about it or judge it based on that. Ask and be curious. Seek and you will find that way of life. You'll find that thread that allows you to begin to rise from those lower places in your moods and that mood elevator up to the higher places. Knock on that door when it is too hard and you see a hard surface in front of you and you don't know what you're doing. Knock, 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 because when you open that, something will be there for you if you are curious enough to not just sit there and do nothing, but to knock on that door and to find out what's on the other side. And so we return to this same one that we looked at the end of last week and the beginning of this message. What's being asked by Jesus is not easy, or you would not need Jesus to help you with it. Jesus only deals with the hard, difficult things that lead us to a better life, that lead us to our best selves, that lead us to be able to lay the anger and the resentment and the judgment and all the other things and clean ourselves to be in a place where we can say, yes, I'm going to help you, and yes, I'm going to judge that what you are doing is out of line with what Jesus is asking us as people of faith to do, but I'm going to give you the courage to do it. If you're curious. Because it's not easy, but it works. So ask and seek and knock. And if you're really good at it, try to be like this little guy right here. Amen.